So I would
Yeah.
love if you would speak, because I think a lot of the audience won't necessarily have a baseline understanding of the difference between mushrooms and fungi. So could you talk a little bit about how fungi are different than plants and animals? And then I would really like you to expand on how you can't separate fungi from their environment, how they are in and digesting their environment, making it. Yeah, I would love it if you would speak to that. Thank you.
As a species, humans um, have decided to communicate about life on Earth and organisms on Earth through a convention that is based on the separation of living beings, based on the type of cell they have, and on how they obtain energy. And in that convention, we've structured in the Linnaean system a way of naming species, a way of putting them together based on their relationships now, with more molecular work plugged into that Linnaean system. And so what we see is that there's an agreement, more or less, of having 5 kingdoms. And I don't say kingdoms with a G. I drop the G. It's kingdom. And so there are more or less, I mean, there could be 5, 6, 7 kingdoms of life. In the 5 kingdom structure, we have the animals, animalia kingdom, plantae, which are the plants, fungi, fungi kingdom, monera, which are bacterias, rickettsias, others, protist or protoctista, which is another kingdom. Now, 4 of these, animals, plants, fungi, and protists, have a eukaryote cell, so a cell that has a defined nucleus, and one, monera, the monera kingdom, has a prokaryotic cell, which is what we call, of course, a primitive cell, because we have the evolved cell, we think. That doesn't have a defined nucleus, and that's where the bacteria and others are. Now, among plants, animals, and fungi and protists, which are these eukaryotic celled organisms, there are differences in cell wall structure or having a cell membrane and how you get your energy. So plants have a eukaryotic cell with a cellulose wall, and they obtain energy through photosynthesis. Animals have a eukaryotic cell with a cell membrane. They don't have a cell wall, cell membrane, which is different, and we obtain our energy through ingestion. Fungi have a cell wall made out of chitin. It's not cellulose like plants, and it's not a membrane like animals. It's a cell wall made out of chitin. And what fungi do is secrete enzymes out into the environment, which is their food. Fungi live inside their food. They digest outside their body, and then they absorb the nutrients back in. Now, just like in plants, there are a huge variety of organisms, from ferns, moss, trees, shrubs, palms. We can talk about so many of them. And in animals, imagine how many we have. We have mammals, vertebrates, we've got birds. It's so many different categories. Inside the kingdom of the fungi, there are many too. So inside the fungi are yeasts, which are unicellular, molds, mushrooms, conchs, lichens, and millions of microscopic organisms of other big groups inside the kingdom. And just to illustrate how diverse it can be, a morel mushroom and an oyster mushroom are as closely related as a whale and a worm. So both whales and worms are animals, and both morels and oysters are fungi, but they're just not closely related inside this kingdom of life. In this kingdom, what we normally see is that there are some features of the life of the organisms inside fungi that can be grouped in 2 or 3 groups. So you have decomposers, you have symbionts, so organisms that form a symbiosis with other organisms, also from other kingdoms, and form a new body, a new organism. And those are basically the 2 big habits that we see. And then the fact of fermentation comes from decomposition a bit. Some people group fermentation differently. So these organisms, all the fungi, are extremely diverse, They're as big a group as plants or animals, or even bigger in terms of number of species. And they are organisms that cannot live without another in such an evident way, that they live inside their food and that they form symbiosis with other organisms, that they are living beings that really, really make apparent how no individual really exists, how every one of us depends on another.
Yeah, that's the most beautiful part about it, that they really complicate our idea of a self. I've also heard you use an amazing metaphor of the egg and the cake. And
Yeah.
about how they're
So,
they're
yeah,
the sticky connective tissue of ecosystems.
there are fungi that can live with an organism and provide service of survival, for example, to animals. Not to go too far, herbivores can't digest the plants they eat in their gut without a fungus that breaks down the cellulose cell wall of the grass they eat,
Huh.
because animals can't do that by themselves.
Yeah.
There's a form of symbiosis and a group of fungi that do that. They don't form mushrooms. They don't, they're microscopic fungi. There are some organisms inside the kingdom of the fungi that are essential for seeds to germinate, for example. In the
Oh,
case of
yeah.
orchids, orchids don't exist without fungi. The orchids cannot germinate without the fungi that allow for them to be able to begin their life. And everywhere you look, every organism has a fungal component that is sustaining them. I mean, I like to say, and I truly believe that they are the firmament of life on Earth.
Mm.
They are the basal organisms that provide the possibility for plants and animals to live. And they also have a very tight relationship with microorganisms. The most potent antibacterials in the world are all produced by fungi. They are bioengineers, let's say, if we want to call them something anthropological. They are bioengineers of nature. They respond to their environment by crafting chemicals and survival techniques that are unique, on Earth, and they really are the big adapters in environment, and they also can change very quickly, and you can find the same species in different forms depending on what stage of life they are. So it's like you can find fungi that are reproducing sexually that are completely different from the same species reproducing asexually. And then when they're in just this like chilled out phase of their life, when they're not reproducing, they're completely different as well. So they are very complex, and there's not one attribute that could be given to the whole kingdom. They are as complex as animals and plants, and even maybe more.